باسم آب و واد و نفس قدوس هذا واملا آمين. باسم آب و واد و نفس قدوس هذا واملا آمين. باسم آب و واد و نفس قدوس هذا واملا آمين. Yes, greetings and hope everyone's doing good. So today's reading is Numbers 21. Give thanks. The Canaanite, the king of Arad, who lived in the south, heard that Israel came by way of Atharim. He fought against Israel and took some of them captive. Israel vowed a vow to Yahweh and said, "If you will indeed deliver this people into my hand, then I will utterly destroy their lives." Yahweh listened to the voice of Israel and delivered up the Canaanites, and they utterly destroyed them and their cities. The name of the place was called Hormah. They travelled from Mount Hor by way of the Red Sea to go around the land of Edom. The soul of the people was very discouraged because of the journey. The people spoke against God and against Moses. "Why have you brought us up out of Egypt to die in the wilderness? For there is no bread, there is no water, and our soul loathes this disgusting food." Yahweh sent venomous snakes among the people, and they bit the people. Many people of Israel died. The people came to Moses and said, "We have sinned because we have spoken against Yahweh and against you. Pray to Yahweh that he take away the serpents from us." Moses prayed for the people. Yahweh said to Moses, "Make a venomous snake and set it on a pole. It shall happen that anyone who is bitten, when he sees it, shall live." Moses made a serpent of bronze and set it on the pole. If a serpent had bitten any man, when he looked at the serpent of bronze, he lived. The children of Israel travelled and encamped on Obath. They travelled from Obath and encamped in Iyabarim, in the wilderness which is before Moab, before the sunrise. From there they travelled and encamped in the valley of Zered. From there they travelled and encamped on the other side of the Arnon, which is in the wilderness that comes out of the border of the Amorites. For the Arnon is the border of Moab, between Moab and the Amorites. Therefore it is said in the book of the wars of Yahweh, Vab in Suppah, the valley of Aaron, the slope of the valleys that incline towards the dwelling of Ar, leans on the border of Moab. From there they travelled to Beer, and that is the well of which Yahweh said to Moses, "Gather the people together, and I will give them water." Then Israel sang this song, "Spring up, well, sing up, the well which the princes dug, which the nobles of the people dug, with the scepter and with their poles." From the wilderness they travelled to Mattanah, and from Mattanah to Nathanael, and from Nahalel to Bomoth, and from Bomoth to the valley that is in the field of Moab, to the top of Pisgah, which looks down on the desert. Israel sent messengers from Sihon, king of the Amorites, saying, "Let me pass through your land. We will not turn away into the field or vineyard. We will not drink of the water of the wells. We will go by the king's highway until we have passed your border." Sihon will not allow Israel to pass through the border, but Sihon gathered all the people together and went out against Israel into the wilderness to come to Jahaz. And he fought against Israel. Israel struck him with the edge of the sword and possessed his land from Arnon to the Jabbok, even to the children of Ammon, to the border of the children of Ammon was fortified. Israel took all these cities. Israel lived in all the cities of the Amorites in Heshbon and in all its villages. For Heshbon was the city of Sihon, the king of the Amorites, and had fought against the former king of Moab, and taken all the land out of his hand, even to Ammon. Therefore those who speak in Proverbs say, "Come to Heshbon, let the city of Sihon be built and established, for a fire has gone out of Heshbon, a flame from the city of Sihon. It is devoured of Moab. The lords of the high places of the Ammon, woe to you, Moab! You are undone, people of Chemosh. He has given his sons as fugitives, and his daughters into captivity to Sihon the king of the Amorites. We have shot at them. Shebon has perished even to Dibon, and have laid waste to Nippah, which reaches to Medeba. Thus Israel lived in the land of the Amorites. Moses sent to spy out Jazer. They took its villages and drove out the Amorites who were there. They turned and went up by the way of Bashan. Og, the king of Bashan, went up against them, he and all his people, to battle at Edrei. Jesus said to Moses, "Don't fear him, for I have delivered him unto your hand, and with all his people and his land. You shall do to him as you did to Sihon the king of the Amorites, who lived in Heshbon." So they struck him with his sons and all his people until there were no survivors, and they possessed his land. Give thanks for these few words, blessed love. Yeah, apologies, I was tripping up on some of those names there. We got a bit technical with the detail of names and places. So in today's chapter, we see a flip side. We see the strength of Israel. You know, all this time we've had a sort of a portrait of the children of Israel and that growing nation as a very kind of vulnerable nation, quite weak at times, and fledglingly going from the Mount Sinai into the Promised Land and being refused, for example, in the last chapter, to be able to go through certain lands. So they had to go the long way, then they start grumbling. So we've really had a portrait of quite a vulnerable people. But this chapter actually shows that the people are actually also strong as well as vulnerable. Inside you have these vulnerabilities and insecurities and lack of belief. But also they are a nation that is on the rise, it's growing, and they're starting to conquer. So in this chapter, we see the children of Israel conquering these different cities and overtaking their towns and their villages and living in the towns and those villages and overthrowing kings. And it's all done with God's protection and God's promise on them. So we're seeing a nation which isn't as weak as sometimes some of the other chapters are portraying. They're very much on the rise, and they're very much a force to be reckoned with in that area. What we do see is, though, again, the people, they start to complain after the first battle that they had and won. As well as being victorious, they also started to get hungry. They were tired, so they started to complain again to Moses. And God didn't have any patience with them, so he immediately threw snakes into the space, and people were bitten, and it said hundreds of people died. So all of a sudden they became repentant, and they said to Moses, "We are sorry for grumbling against God, and we're sorry for grumbling against you. Please save us." So Moses, again, as the ultimate intercessor, and Moses very much has the protection of the people at his heart, went to God and asked God to stop the serpents and to save the people. So God does a quite interesting, curious thing. They say God works in mysterious ways. He asked Moses to create a bronze serpent, put it on a pole, and whoever gets bitten to look at that serpent, and they shall be saved. And this feels like quite a curious thing when you think about the graving images, and why would he be creating a bronze serpent for people to look at? And if we jump forward in the Bible to John 3, John 3:14 to 15, we see Jesus recounting this story, and Jesus comes as the new bronze symbol, and he himself said that Moses had this bronze serpent that the people looked at. The children of Israel were immediately healed when they looked at this bronze serpent, but those who now look upon me will be saved and have everlasting eternal life. So Jesus presents this analogy between this bronze serpent, this mysterious object that was happening at this time, and says, I am now the replacement of that bronze serpent. You don't need these objects anymore, and I have come to fulfill that covenant. So Jesus is very aware of these echoes, but also he's very aware of himself, and comes to fulfill that promise of what that meant. This is hundreds of years later when Jesus Christos arrives on the planet after what's happening in Numbers 21, but the connection is if it was almost happened yesterday. So it's a very strong, powerful, symbolic union between Jesus Christos and what's happening in here with this particular chapter. It also has adverse consequences. In 2 Kings 18, we see that the Israelites are worshipping the bronze serpent. They're not just taking it as this moment of healing. And in a way, you could probably see that coming. So the symbol then replaces God as a focus of worship, and they start to worship the bronze serpent itself as a form of idolatry, which is then clamped down in that time. So yeah, an interesting set of solutions, I guess, that God and Moses bring to the children of Israel, but it is to save them in that time, but it has these long consequences, but which ultimately Jesus Christos comes to fulfill and show the meaning of that. So they go on in the chapter and they continue to overthrow other cities and towns. And yeah, very much edging slowly and slower, but as you can also see, they're also facing resistance as well, which is understandable. People are living there, and this is a nation coming to a promised land, but there is resistance to that as well. So yeah, there's many intricacies, I'll put it that way. So yeah, that's going to be enough for me for today. So I hope you find this interesting. I certainly do, and I'm learning a lot in this process, and just speaking and making sense of certain connections. That's what this is all about, just slowly and surely edging forward as we journey through the different chapters of the Bible. And I think it's a very wise tradition. I know it from the 12 tribes of Israel in Rastafari, which says read a chapter a day. And I think that's a very wise thing. Don't read it like a novel and try to devour all books, in one go, like, reading it all, just taking it chunk by chunk and little bit by little bit, and just coming up with fuller understandings and revelations as we go. So I give thanks that I have the opportunity to do this, and give thanks that sharing in this process as well. So yeah, have a brilliant day, a joyous day, stay safe, and God willing, be back more tomorrow. Give thanks.